that was probably one of the more underwhelming season openers that we've seen in a pretty long time. That Warriors Nets game was very, very tough to watch. And yeah, it was just a blowout from the first quarter onwards. The Nets, they pulled away early, and the Warriors, they didn't even come close to coming back in the game or even just making it competitive. But at the same time, as bad as the Warriors were, as good as the Nets were, we can't really just determine how good these teams are going to be based off the first game of the season. Oftentimes, teams play bad in the first game of the season, and then they end up playing well the rest of the way, and they finish with a good record, and then vice versa. There's teams who might look really good in the first game of the season, and then they finish with a bad record. Not saying that that's going to be the case for either of these teams. I'm just saying that we shouldn't make too big of a deal out of this one game, because after all, it is just one game, and these teams, there's going to be a lot of changes that happen throughout the season. So yeah, we shouldn't overreact to this. First of all, though, I want to talk about the Nets and then the Warriors afterwards, just because I feel like there's not as much that we have to really talk about with the Nets. They just looked flat out amazing. Offensively, they were great. Guys like Kyrie, KD, they were scoring the ball effortlessly. Caris LeVert had a pretty underrated game off the bench. Joe Harris was good. They just looked great, honestly, on the offensive end. They were hitting, it seemed like, all their shots. They were just incredible, and it just goes to show how valuable it is to have multiple guys that can really create, because that was one of the main things I'll get into later with the Warriors. The Warriors just seemed like they couldn't do anything without Curry in the game, right? Even without Kyrie or KD in the game, the Nets still have guys that can create, like Caris LeVert, as I mentioned. He had a really, really good game. Spencer Dinwiddie going forward, he's going to have games where he plays really well. Landry Shamet, he has some underrated playmaking skills and shot creation ability. He made some nice passes in the game. He didn't put up like a whole lot of points, at least, off the top of my head. I don't remember him scoring too much, but he's going to have games where he goes off for like 20 plus and hits a lot of threes, hits a lot of shots that he's creating for himself. He's an underrated player. The Nets just have a bunch of those guys, and I thought that they did a good job of pushing the pace. That was one thing I really liked with this team. I think that D'Antoni's influence definitely showed in that game. When they were getting rebounds or forcing turnovers, they were looking to push, and they were looking to find guys on the three-point line, and that was really, really fun to watch. Like I said, they were just making all their shots, and it was really entertaining, honestly. And I thought that although there was a lot of times where they were scoring in one-on-one situations, I felt like they weren't really stagnant on offense. It looked like every time they were doing something on the offensive end, it looked natural, and it didn't look uncomfortable or hard to watch or anything like that. It just looked like they had a lot of purpose on the offensive end. They weren't swinging the ball a ton or making tons of passes, but when they were making passes, it was to really put guys in good positions and effective positions to where they could be efficient with the ball. Like, they would swing the ball to a guy like Caris LeVert and put him in a position where he could tackle to the pick and roll and make a play out of it, right? Or they would swing the ball and get Kyrie or KD established in a certain area on the court and get them the ball in that area on the court to where they could take their defender one-on-one and try to score on them, right? And that's fine, honestly. It was super effective tonight, and there's going to be lots of nights where they just flat out talent other teams on the offensive end, and they did that tonight. I just really liked the offensive strategy from this Nets team. On top of that, I liked some of the off-ball movement they had for Joe Harris, just because that's going to make the defense scramble, and it's going to put the Nets in positions to where they have the defense scrambling, the defense is all over the place, and that's when they can really put on display the amount of playmakers that they have, because maybe Joe Harris gets the ball off a curl and he kicks out to Spencer Dinwiddie. Spencer Dinwiddie attacks off a closeout, kicks out to Kyrie, then he drives, finds KD in the corner, KD hits an open three. So stuff like that is just going to really open up the offense, and that's a really good thing for this Nets team. On top of that, their defense looked pretty good tonight too. I don't know if it was more so that the Nets defense was good or the Warriors offense was just really bad. I think it's a little bit of both, but it looked solid. It was good enough, and like I said, going into the season, I thought the Nets defense would be good enough to get by. I thought their offense was what was going to carry them the most, of course. The most important thing, though, with the Nets was that KD looked like his normal self, and Kyrie, he missed a lot of games too, and he looked like his normal self again too, so that's the best thing. KD just looked like he didn't even get injured at all, honestly. Like, he didn't look any slower. His shot looked great. He had some nice athletic moves going to the rim. He just looked really, really good, looked really, really smooth, and looked like he hadn't lost his step whatsoever. So the Nets were really good, but the Warriors were absolutely awful, and they were really bad on both ends of the floor. First things first, the defense was very undisciplined. It just seemed like there were a lot of guys that were out of position. The effort was kind of inconsistent. It was there. Sometimes it was not there other times. But yeah, the main thing was just not being in the right position on defense. Like, I remember there was one play in particular where Eric Pascal was literally angling his body, allowing KD a wide open drive to the bucket, a wide open lane to the bucket to just drive. And I know that sometimes it was the one where KD drove baseline for the dunk. And I know that sometimes coaches try to implement a defensive strategy where they force guys to the sideline or they force guys to the baseline, right? Because that sideline or that baseline, that out of bounds area can act as another defender, right? But in that case, he was just angling his body so much that KD basically just had a wide open lane to the rim and he just took it and scored easily. So just little things like that. I noticed a lot of little mental errors, mental lapses throughout the game that the Warriors were doing, and that contributed to the Nets having such a great offensive night. I think that Draymond being healthy and playing on that team, getting a lot of minutes, could help because he's such a great communicator on the defensive end. So I feel like he would make sure that guys are in the right positions, they're doing the right things, and overall he would just make sure that everyone else on the floor is really focused, right? So he would really help out the discipline of this team on the defensive end. But I don't even know how much a guy like Draymond can help this team out on the offensive end, because this team has a ton of issues on that end of the floor. The main issue that they have is definitely shooting, and that was something I was concerned about going into the year, because obviously they have Curry, who's the greatest shooter of all time, but I'm just talking about the guys that are surrounding Curry, because he's going to have the ball in his hands most of the time this year, and he's going to have guys that he can kick the ball out to and trust to knock down an open three. And tonight, no one was really hitting their threes. I mean, Oubre was absolutely horrible. The thing is, he's just very inconsistent from three. He's going to have nights like tonight where he can't hit a three at all. And then there's going to be nights where he's pretty good from three. But throughout the whole season, it's going to average out to like 34, 35%, which is league average from three. And if Oubre is like the best shooter that you're surrounding Steph with, that you're giving consistent minutes to, then that's not a good sign. I mean, you've got Wiggins there as well, but he's probably a below average three-point shooter. Draymond Green's going to be coming back. He's not a very good shooter. Eric Pascal is not a very good shooter. Bazemore's respectable. Marquise Chris isn't that great, even though he was okay tonight. Wanamaker only shoots them when he's wide open. And even though James Wiseman showed some outside touch in the fourth quarter of this game, I don't even know if the Warriors want to use him in that way, because their system has been predicated on having a big that can set screens, roll to the rim, catch lobs, get a lot of buckets in and around the paint, right? And so I think that's the way they want to use him when Curry's in the game, when Draymond's in the green. I mean, you notice that pretty much all the jump shots I think that he hit in the game came in the fourth quarter, came in garbage time when it was James Wiseman and a bunch of guys that are, on third stringers on this team, when there was no real expectation in the fourth quarter. He was just launching up shots because he knew that, the game was over, he wasn't going to get any backlash for it. Yeah, I don't remember seeing Wiseman attempting any perimeter shots with Curry and the starters in the game, just because I think that Steve Kerr wants to use him as more of a rim rolling big that can catch lobs, finish around the rim, stuff like that. I don't think he wants to use him as a stretch big. So if Wiseman's not really attempting any outside shots and Draymond's not shooting well again, Wiggins and Oubre are just average at best, there's going to be a lot of nights like tonight where they're just not able to buy a bucket from three, and that could lose them a lot of games throughout this season. Another main issue that I noticed with this team on the offensive end was the lack of movement that they had. This team just seemed to have no continuity and flow on the offensive end, and I know it's early on, but I did worry about the personnel that they were bringing in to play with one another going into this season. Like, for example, Andrew Wiggins. In Minnesota, he wasn't ever playing in an environment that was predicated on ball movement and player movement like the Warriors system is. He was used to having the ball in his hands and kind of just being able to do whatever he wanted, almost like dribble as much as he wanted, attempt bad mid-range pull-ups and not really face any repercussions for that, just stuff like that. And it doesn't work like that in Golden State. Same thing with Oubre. He's not exactly the same as Wiggins, but he hasn't been a great playmaker throughout his career just because he gets tunnel vision and often he can't make the right read, or he fails to make the right read and make the right pass. And that's just another thing, another bad quality that doesn't fit into this Warriors system. And when you're playing with Curry needs guys that can also set him up. He's a great passer, but he needs guys that can set him up and put him in positions to score. Get him the ball when he's coming off screens, find him when he's moving off the ball. Draymond is great at doing that, so I think he could help there. But guys like Wiggins and Oubre, Eric Pascal too, they're not great at making the right reads and making the right passes, and that's something that they're hopefully going to have to improve on throughout the season if this offense wants to become more consistent and just better overall. Last thing I'm going to say before I go, I noticed this with Wiseman. He tended to shy away from screens and making contact on screens a lot. There were some good screens that he was setting, but it was almost like 50-50. You didn't know what you were going to get. You didn't know if you were going to get a good screen or a really bad screen. There were a lot of times where it seemed like he wanted to slip the screen. He was very eager to slip the screen, but he wasn't in a position to slip the screen. So it was just a bad read on his part. And then even off ball, there were some screens where I noticed that he wasn't really getting his body in front of the defender. And that could be a very underrated issue with this team, because it's just going to limit guys' ability to get open, right, and get more open looks, because they're not really creating any separation from their defender. I'm definitely not giving up on the Warriors. It's only one game, and I know they looked really, really bad, but it's only one game. They could definitely bounce back. They've got a lot of talented players on this team, so there's potential here. I mean, I predicted them to make the 8th seed. I think they can still make the playoffs. So hopefully they can improve going into their next game, but they've got a lot of things that they've got to sort out if they want to improve.